Hey guys, welcome back to Pete Punch Beef Gaming. Today we're going to continue our journey on the Age of Sigmar Path to Glory. In fact, this is a recap of week 1 and what week 2 will hopefully bring to the discussion. All right, so let's start with a quick recap and what we're going to chat about in this video. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the armies that I put together. I started a brand new Stormcast Eternals army, new on the sprue, not built, not primed, not nothing. So I'll talk a little bit about the progress there. I'll talk about the couple of battles that I've got to fight and kind of really what my lessons learned in that. And then we'll talk a little bit about what week 2 has in store for us in this video. So with that, let's get started. Games themselves, I got a chance to play 2 games total, and when I go to my handy dandy Age of Sigmar book, there's a good place for us to record kind of what everything is and what you got to go through and who you fought. And so I fought 2 battles in total this week. And the first battle I played against some Nighthawks. I had a great opponent, young man, pretty experienced though with Age of Sigmar altogether, and we played at 750 points, which was the bare bones minimum for our current Path to Glory campaign against my Stormcast Eternals. The scenario we played was a Path to Glory mission called Hold or Die, and in which case my army was set up in the middle and he got to set up around me, but he had to be 9 inches away and fully within his territory. There weren't any victory points. It was all based on if you could eliminate army, a certain amount of my Vanguard force before turn 3. And as it was, I managed to pick up a major victory in that one, but not because my opponent didn't come hard. He did. He played a great game overall. But it just turned out that the staying power of the Storm Guard were just probably more than a match for his Night Gaunts. When you get right down to it. Of note, with this Age of Sigmar Path to Glory, we start off with 1,000-point armies, but you can only field 750 to begin with. So that meant that I had to leave out my Annihilators, which were the hammer and shield guys. I didn't have the great hammers. And the Emerald Life Swarm spell. That also had to sit out in this case. And, ultimately that endless spell I think is going to be great for some staying power. One thing I do want to note that was kind of a little bit of a lesson learned for me is I think the Stormcasts are pretty resilient, but they don't do a ton of damage. In fact, my Praetors, which are kind of the chief defenders, were the ones that did the most damage in that battle. Although I will say that my Vindictors were pretty good with their mortal wounds on to hit rolls of 6, so that was pretty cool overall. The post-game wrap-up, some kind of cool things happened in that. Number one, and this is kind of bad news, but one of my Praetors was wounded as a result of the injury roll, but I was able to re-roll that with the glory point. And I completed the Defend Your Realm quest, which gives me an additional 10 glory points. So that got me a total of 19 glory points. With that, I spent 1 to re-roll. I spent 10 on a new small settlement. And I also got the 10, like I said, for the quest for the Defend Your Realm. So overall, pretty good game. Great opponent. A lot of fun to play against. I really appreciate him kind of walking me through how his abilities work, where he got them from, all that good stuff. So I definitely want to give that young man another game here in the future. I'm sure he'll exact some great revenge. The next game I played against was against a Nurglekin army, which is a brand new army. And man, is it pretty cool. It's a little bit unorthodox when you get down to it. We played the Trap, which kind of gives me 5/6 of the board and wedges them into kind of a small corner of the board. And they get 5 victory points per unit they field, and I get 2 victory points per unit I kill. But their 5 victory points, or their victory points that they accrue each round. So it's pretty quick for them to run away. And Nurgle has a lot of really good staying power, and you couple that with the fact that they have all those disease counters and cause mortal wounds. It was a really tough uphill slog. My only hope was to table them, And I did the best I could, but at the end of the game, I fell to the plague and he tabled me. Fortunately, I only had one injury to recount, and that was my Knight Arcanum. Asterix is his name, and he got a major wound, which means he's going to start the next game he plays with D3 wounds missing that can't be healed. My quest for that one was search for the artifact, and unfortunately I was tabled, so I got nothing out of that. Glory points per playing was 5 overall because I participated. I had to spend 1 on a reroll for a wound against one of my Vindictors, and then I also rolled a territory, the Realmstone Reserve. So I started the game with 16 glory points. I got 4. I spent 10 on the Realmstone Reserve, which should get me more renown points for my units down the road, which is really good because that gives them kind of some of those special abilities that they can use in the game. Again, I didn't use my Annihilators, nor did I use for my endless spell the Emerald Lifestorm, but it was a good game overall. I learned a lot, and my opponent was fantastic, very gracious, made a ton of good defensive plays, turtling up his army and forcing me to be around his plague trees, and he just beat me. That's all there is to it. But it was so much fun overall. It is important to note that between the two games, that my Praetors both time were kind of the heroes of each of the two games, and they actually ended up leveling up, and they get something called Large of the Charge. They got a special ability called Lightning Charged Bolts, which I think does mortal wounds on 6 to wound, which is really cool. So next week, we're going to be rolling into 1,000-point games, and I'll recap that here in a second. But I've got to look at playing with my full roster, which I'll go over here in just a minute. And I'm starting to think about how I'm going to expand my roster, and I'll talk about that here shortly. But in the interim, we're going to talk a little bit about the hobby and what I got done for this week. Okay, so with the hobbying portion, I think you'll remember I started off by last week showing you that I had nothing built, all of it on sprues. And so I was able to get it all built, which is great, along with get it all primed up. And I started on painting some of my Vindictors, my first squad of Vindictors. And it's important to note that I went with a gray primer that I put on with my airbrush. It's pretty cold in my neck of the woods, and given that I'm filming this over kind of the winter months, outdoor spray rattle can priming just wasn't going to work. And I went with a gray because I wanted some bright colors for that gold and blue traditional scheme of the Hammers of Sigmar overall. So I was able to get the base color of the gold down, which I ended up using in this case the Retributor Armor. So that's what I went with, and then I did a gloss flesh tone shade to kind of add some depth to it, and then I'm going to work up through the Auric Armor, and then finally the Liberator Gold as my final layer on that. So I'm looking forward to see what I'm get, and you guys can see the pictures of kind of the progress that I made on that. So overall, I'm pretty happy with where I got with the colors. Now, this next week, I'm going to try and get a bit more done. I'd like to finish at least the squad I started and move into the second squad. I don't know if I'm going to do the Vindictors again, or if I'm going to move on to, say, maybe the Annihilators, something along those lines, but we'll see. My goal is to have at least 2 squads done in this case. I do want to talk about what's interesting is those models I got out of the Dominion box set were all push fit. I did end up gluing them just to make sure they held together, but what I did notice is although they went together very easily in most cases, some of it can be a little bit tricky to get it set up. Use your parent or your adult to help you if you're a young kid working on these things. But those push to fit don't always leave the smallest gaps. In some cases, there were some pretty good sized gaps, which you can see in the picture here that I'm showing. Is that big a deal? No, I've got some great modeling putty to fill it with, so I'll go ahead and do that. But it is an extra step, which is a little bit of a bummer, but not too big of a deal. But overall, pretty cleanly done when you get right down to it. So next week, I did mention that we'll be moving into 1,000-point armies, which I'm excited about to see kind of how it comes together. I did mention that the army's pretty resilient, but it isn't the hardest hitting of armies, and so I definitely felt like I wanted to up my hitting power in that case. And it's a little bit on the slow side, except for the fact that with my Scion of the Storm ability or faction that I chose, I was able to teleport some of my models in, which definitely helps with the speed issue that I've got going on. The other thing I noticed too is with the Path to Glory scenarios, there's not a ton of objective markers. So my Hammer of Sigmar faction selection, which gives me a 6+ ward save when I'm within, I think, either 6 or 12 inches of a objective marker, didn't come into play at all, which could have been a big help. In fact, in that Nurgle battle, everything that killed me was a result of those 4+ plague rolls that I got. And every turn for almost every unit, he was rolling 3 or 4 dice, looking for 3 ups sometimes, or 4 ups, and sometimes even 3 ups to do a mortal wound. And I just didn't have anything to mitigate that, which made it really, really tough. And in Path of Glory, when you use a unit, they don't actually get any sort of additional renown points, which really hurts them for their upgrade. So I need to do something about mortal wounds when you get. So that leads me into, all right, you got 1,000 points. You've got some glory points to spend to build up your roster. Where are you going to go with this? And I'll tell you where I'm going to go with it. I was debating on adding either the Chariot, which hits pretty hard, or maybe looking for a Lord Arcanum on some sort of beast to ride. But I ultimately decided to go with, because I had a few extra ducats to spend on the hobby this month, these super sweet dragons. The Stormdrake Guard, they just look like they're going to do a ton of damage when you get there. You can feel them either in multiple dragons in a unit, or you can go with just one. And I think out of the gate, I'm probably just going to go with one, but I'll build them both. I think the models look really cool and dynamic. And so I'm going to work on getting those built this week as well. I don't know that these will get painted this week, but I am going to be working on them before too long. I would like at the end of this thing to have a fully painted army when we finish with it overall. So that's kind of the recap. 2 great games in, a lot of really good lessons learned. I have a fun army started with 2 new territories, both the Small Settlement and the Realmstone Reserve. I'm sitting on 20 glory points going into week 2 and future games, so I'm really excited about that. With a brand new unit to play. My total unit count is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units, and I haven't built a barracks yet. That's okay, because I can get to 10 units before I need to build a barracks. And for those that are wondering, I did start with my stronghold. My starting territory was an old keep, which gave me an extra hero. It's one thing I noticed about the Stormcast is they've got a ton of great heroes to use, and so I definitely wanted to expand my hero capacity right out of the gate. Now again, I only have the Lord Imperiant and the Knight Arcanum, but I suspect that I'll be adding the standard bearer with the Apotheosis banner here before too long. So that's where we stand. I really appreciate you guys tuning in for the recap of week 1 of my Age of Sigmar Path to Glory Sigmar vlog. If you like what I'm doing, please subscribe. Please like the video, and we'll see you next week about the same time for week 2 recap of where we're at and how it's going. So thanks so much, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.